The rain hammered against the 42nd floor windows of Winter's Technology like angry fists, demanding entry. Emma Chen pushed her wire-rimmed glasses up her nose for the 100th time that evening, her fingers trembling slightly as she organized the quarterly reports scattered across her desk. The office was nearly empty now. Just the hum of computers and the distant sound of the cleaning crew echoing through the halls. At 23 at 2, Emma had mastered the art of invisibility. Her black hair was always pulled into a neat bun, her clothes carefully chosen in muted grays and browns that helped her blend into the background. She spoke in whispers, walked quietly, and had perfected the skill of being present but unnoticed. It was safer that way, especially in a company where the CEO was known for his ice-cold demeanor and impossible standards. Alexander Winters. Even thinking his name made Emma's heart skip nervously. The 34-year-old had built his tech empire from nothing, and his reputation for ruthless efficiency was legendary. Employees whispered about his piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through people, his perfectly tailored suits, and the way he could silence a room just by walking in. Emma had been working at his company for 18 months, and he had never spoken directly to her. She preferred it that way. The late-night Emma glanced at the clock. 9:30 p.m. She should have left hours ago, but the monthly presentation needed to be perfect. Her supervisor had specifically requested that she'd stay late to finish the data compilation, and Emma never said no to extra work. It was her way of proving she belonged here, despite feeling like an outsider every single day. The elevator dinged softly in the distance, and Emma froze. Most of the executives had left by 7, who could be coming up this late. She tried to focus on her spreadsheets, but her hands were shaking now. Footsteps in the hallway were deliberate, confident. She recognized that walk. Alexander Winters appeared at the entrance to the main office area, his dark hair slightly damp from the rain outside. His charcoal suit was immaculate despite the weather, and those famous blue eyes swept across the nearly empty space until they landed on Emma's desk. She quickly looked down, pretending to be absorbed in her work. Emma held her breath as his footsteps approached. She had never been alone with him before, never even been in the same small space. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain he could hear it. When his shadow fell across her desk, she finally looked up, expecting to see annoyance or impatience in his expression. Instead, she saw something unexpected. Concern the moment everything changed, Miss Chen. His voice was softer than she had. Ever heard it? You should have gone home hours ago. Emma blinked in surprise. He knew her name. After 18 months of careful invisibility, Alexander Winters knew who she was. I was just finishing the quarterly reports, Mr. Winters, she managed to whisper. They need to be ready for tomorrow's meeting. Alexander's eyes swept over the neat stacks of papers, the perfectly organized charts, the laptop screen showing complex spreadsheets. For a moment, something shifted in his expression, but it was gone so quickly Emma thought she might have imagined it. The reports can wait, he said. It's nearly 10 o'clock. Emma nodded quickly, beginning to gather her papers. In her nervousness, she knocked over her coffee mug, sending lukewarm coffee spreading across her desk. She jumped up to grab paper towels, mortified by her clumsiness in front of the most important person in the company. I'm so sorry, she stammered, rushing toward the supply cabinet. I'll clean this up right away. The supply cabinet was tall, with the paper towels stored on the top shelf. Emma was barely 5 feet tall, and even on her tiptoes, she couldn't quite reach. She glanced around for something to stand on, acutely aware that Alexander was watching her every move. There was a small step stool in the corner, and Emma dragged it over to the cabinet. Her hands were still shaking from embarrassment. As she climbed up, the paper towels were just within reach when the stool shifted slightly under her feet. Careful, Alexander's voice came from behind her. But it was too late. The stool tilted, and Emma felt herself falling backward. Time seemed to slow down as she realized there was nothing to grab onto. She closed her eyes, bracing for the impact. With the hard floor instead, strong arms caught her, pulling her against a solid chest. Emma's eyes flew open to find herself looking directly into Alexander's face, mere inches away. His blue eyes were wide with something she had never seen. Before fear, are you hurt? He asked urgently, his voice rough with emotion she didn't understand. Emma shook her head, too stunned to speak. She was acutely aware of his arms around her, of the expensive cologne he wore, of the way his usually perfect hair was slightly must from catching her. For a moment that felt like forever, they stayed frozen like that. Then Alexander seemed to realize their position and carefully helped her stand. But as Emma put weight on her left ankle, a sharp pain shot through her leg, and she gasped. "The unexpected response to your ankle," Alexander said immediately, noticing her wince. "Sit down. I'm fine," Emma protested, but when she tried to take a step, her ankle buckled beneath her. Alexander caught her again, this time sweeping her up in his arms before she could protest. "You're not fine," he said firmly, carrying her to the nearest chair. "Don't move." Emma sat in stunned silence as Alexander knelt beside her chair, his hands gentle as he examined her ankle. She had never seen him like this. The cold, distant CEO replaced by someone who seemed genuinely concerned about her well-being. "It's swelling," he observed, his fingers carefully probing the injured area. "We need to get you to a hospital, Mr. Winters." "I don't need a hospital," Emma said quickly. "It's just a twist. I can call a cab and go home." Alexander looked up at her, and for the first time Emma saw something in his eyes that took her breath away. It wasn't just concern. It was something deeper, more personal, as if her pain was causing him pain too. "You're not going anywhere alone," he said quietly. "I'm taking you to the emergency room." Before Emma could protest, Alexander was on his phone, speaking in quick clipped tones to someone about bringing his car around. Then he was back at her side, his attention focused entirely on her. "This is my fault," he said suddenly, his voice thick with guilt. "I should have helped you reach the towels. I should have noticed you were struggling." Emma stared at him in amazement. The Alexander Winters she had heard about would never admit fault, never show vulnerability. Yet here he was, looking as if her minor injury was somehow his personal failure. "It's not your fault," she said softly. "I'm just clumsy." "You're not clumsy." The words came out sharper than he seemed to intend. "You're tired because you've been working late every night this week. You're overworked and understaffed, and I haven't been paying attention to my employees' well-being." Emma didn't know what to say. She had worked late every night, trying to keep up with the impossible workload, but she had assumed that was normal. That complaining would only mark her as weak or ungrateful. The hospital visit, the ride to the hospital passed in a blur. Alexander's driver was waiting outside, and within minutes, they were speeding through the rainy Chicago streets. Emma sat in the back seat of the luxurious car, acutely aware of Alexander beside her, his presence both comforting and overwhelming. "Have you been with the company long?" he asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Emma was surprised by the question. 18 months, she replied, "and before that, I worked at a small accounting firm in the suburbs." This job. It was like a dream come true for me. She hesitated, then added, "My parents always said I should aim higher, but I never thought I was smart enough for a company like yours." Alexander turned to look at her fully. "Not smart enough?" "Emma, your work is some of the most detailed and accurate I've ever seen. The quarterly reports you've been preparing are exceptional." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. He'd been looking at her work, noticing her contributions. All those late nights, all that careful attention to detail, he had seen it. "You've been reviewing my reports?" she asked quietly. "Every one," Alexander admitted. "I review all department reports personally, but yours always stood out. The attention to detail, the thoughtful analysis." "I've been meaning to speak with you about a possible promotion." Emma's breath caught. A promotion. After 18 months of feeling invisible, of doubting her worth, her boss had been planning to promote her. At the hospital, Alexander refused to leave her side. He spoke with the doctors, ensured she received immediate attention, and stayed with her through the x-rays and examination. When the doctor confirmed it was just a bad sprain, but would require rest and physical therapy, Alexander nodded seriously, as if receiving a medical briefing about a family member. As they waited for the discharge papers, Emma noticed something that made her heart stop. Alexander was sitting beside her hospital bed, his head in his hands, and she could see his shoulders shaking slightly. "Mr. Winters?" she said softly. "Are you all right?" When he looked up, Emma gasped. There were tears in his eyes, actual tears. The cold, untouchable CEO of Winters Technology was crying because she had hurt her ankle. "I'm sorry," he said roughly, wiping at his eyes. "I don't know. What's wrong with me? When I saw you falling, when I thought you might be seriously hurt, I've never felt fear like that before." "What?" This vulnerable, emotional man was nothing like the distant figure she had admired from afar. This was someone real, someone who cared deeply despite his reputation for coldness. "You were afraid for me?" she whispered. Alexander nodded, not trusting his voice. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that neither had expected. Emma reached out tentatively and placed her small hand over his larger one. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for caring, for being here. I've never had anyone worry about me like this before." Alexander turned his hand palm up, gently grasping her fingers. "Emma," he said, his voice barely audible, "I need you to know something. This isn't just about you being my employee. This is about you being important to me. More important than I realized until tonight." Emma's heart soared and plummeted simultaneously. The most successful, powerful man she had ever known was telling her she mattered to him. But the gulf between their worlds seemed impossible to bridge. The night that changed everything, when they finally left the hospital, it was nearly midnight. Alexander helped Emma into his car, his touch gentle and careful. Instead of giving his driver her address, he gave his own. "You shouldn't be alone tonight," he explained, when Emma looked at him questioningly. "What if the pain gets worse?" "What? If you need help?" Emma wanted to protest, but the truth was, she didn't want to be alone. Her tiny apartment would feel even lonelier after this evening with Alexander. And despite everything she had been taught about knowing her place, about not reaching above her station, she found herself nodding. Alexander's penthouse was everything Emma had imagined, and nothing like she had expected. It was luxurious, yes, but it was also stark and lonely. The expensive furniture looked barely used. The walls were empty of personal photos, and the whole space felt more like a hotel than a home. "It's not very welcoming," Alexander admitted, noticing her looking around. "I spend most of my time at the office." "It's beautiful," Emma said honestly, "but it does feel empty." Alexander helped her to the couch, propping her injured ankle on pillows and bringing her ice. Then he sat beside her, closer than propriety dictated, and Emma felt her world shifting around her. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. Alexander nodded. "Why did you cry at the hospital?" Really, Alexander was quiet for so long Emma thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with honesty. "'Cause for 18 months I've been watching you," he admitted. "Every morning when you arrive early, every evening when you stay late, the way you smile at the security guard, the way you always hold doors for others, the way you never complain even when you're clearly overwhelmed. You're the kindest person in that entire building, Emma, the only genuine person. And tonight, when I thought I might have lost you before I ever got the chance to really know you," he trailed off, but Emma understood. She also understood that her life had just changed forever as she sat in Alexander Winter's penthouse, her injured ankle throbbing, but her heart soaring. Emma realized that sometimes the most unexpected moments lead to the most extraordinary changes. Sometimes a simple accident can reveal truths that were hidden just beneath the surface. And sometimes the coldest hearts are simply the ones that have been waiting the longest for the right person to warm them. Emma woke up on the most comfortable couch she had ever experienced, wrapped in a cashmere blanket that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan that made her temporarily forget about her throbbing ankle. The events of the previous night came flooding back: the accident, the hospital, Alexander's tears, and his confession that he had been watching her for months. She touched her face, wondering if she had dreamed it all. But the professional bandage on her ankle confirmed it was real. The sound of quiet movement in the kitchen made her turn. Alexander appeared carrying a tray with coffee, toast, and what looked like a professional ice pack. He was dressed casually in dark jeans and a soft gray sweater, his usually perfect hair slightly tousled. Emma had never seen him look so approachable. "Good morning," he said softly, setting the tray on the coffee table. "How's the pain?" "Better," Emma replied, struggling to sit up properly. "Thank you for letting me stay. I should probably get home and get ready for work." Alexander sat beside her, his expression serious. "Emma, you're not going to work today. Doctor's orders were rest and elevation for at least 48 hours. But the quarterly reports need to be finished, and the Johnson project deadline is tomorrow, and will all be handled by other people," Alexander interrupted firmly. Your health is more important than any project. Emma looked at him in amazement. The driven CEO who never missed a day of work was telling her to prioritize rest over deadlines. The contradiction was almost too much to process. I can't afford to miss work, she said quietly. I need this job, Mr. Winters. I can work from home if necessary. Alexander, he corrected. You're not missing work. You're taking medical leave. Paid medical leave. Your job will be waiting for you when you're ready to return. The unexpected visitor over the next few days, Alexander, made it his routine to stop by Emma's small apartment every morning before work and every evening afterward. He brought her groceries, helped her with daily tasks that were difficult with her injured ankle, and slowly began to share pieces of himself that Emma was certain no one else had ever seen. On the third evening, he arrived carrying Chinese takeout and a small wrapped package. What's this? Emma asked, accepting the gift with surprise. Open it, he said, seeming almost nervous. Inside was a first edition copy of Jane Eyre, Emma's favorite book, though she had no idea how he knew that. I noticed you reading it during your lunch break, Alexander explained at her questioning look. You seem to treasure that worn paperback copy. I thought you might like to have a version that will last. Emma ran her fingers over the leather binding, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. This must have cost a fortune. I can't accept something so expensive. It's not about the cost, Alexander said quietly. It's about showing you that I pay attention. That I see you, Emma. Really see you. As they ate dinner together on her small couch, Alexander shared stories about his childhood that revealed the man behind the corporate facade. He told her about growing up in foster care after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12, about working multiple jobs through college, about the loneliness that came with success. I've spent so many years building walls, he admitted. It was easier than risking being hurt again. But watching you these past months, seeing your kindness, even when you thought no one was looking, you've made me want to tear those walls down.
Then,
Growing connection, Ma found herself opening up in ways she never had before. She told Alexander about her insecurities, about growing up feeling invisible, about her dreams of maybe writing a novel someday, but never believing she was talented. Enough. You want to be a writer? Alexander asked, his eyes lighting up with interest. Emma blushed. It's silly. I've always loved stories. The way they can transport you, make you feel less alone. It's not silly at all, Alexander said firmly. What kind of stories do you want to write? Stories about people like me, Emma said quietly. Ordinary people who discover they're capable of extraordinary things. People who find love in unexpected places. Alexander reached over and took her hand. There's nothing ordinary about you, Emma. You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. The intensity in his voice made Emma's breath catch. She looked into his blue eyes and saw something that made her heart race, the same longing she felt reflected back at her. The first kiss had happened on the 5th evening. As they sat together watching the sunset from Emma's tiny balcony, Alexander was helping her with the physical therapy exercises the doctor had prescribed, his hands gentle as he guided her ankle through the movements. You're an excellent patient, he said, smiling at her progress. I have an excellent nurse. Emma replied, then blushed at her boldness. Alexander's hands stilled on her ankle. When he looked up, the expression in his eyes took Emma's breath away. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he reached up to cup her face in his hands. Emma, he whispered, may I kiss you? Instead of answering, Emma leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their lips met softly, tentatively, and then, with growing passion, it was Emma's first real kiss, and she marveled at how perfectly they fit together. How natural it felt to be in Alexander's arms. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. I've wanted to do that since the night of the accident, Alexander admitted. I've wanted you to do that since my first day at the company, Emma confessed, and immediately covered her mouth in embarrassment. Alexander laughed, the sound rich and warm. 18 months of mutual pining? We're quite a pair, aren't we? The complication their peaceful bubble was burst the next morning when Emma's phone rang. It was her mother, calling from her hometown 2 hours away. Emma, dear, I just heard from Mrs. Patterson that you've been injured. I'm driving up to take care of you. Emma's stomach dropped. Her mother, Janet Chen, was a well-meaning but overwhelming woman who had very specific ideas about Emma's life. She had never approved of Emma's move to Chicago or her job at such a flashy company. "Mom, you don't need to come. Fine, really. Nonsense. A mother's place is with her injured daughter. I'll be there by noon." Emma hung up and immediately called Alexander, panic in her voice. "My mother is coming," she said without preamble when he answered. "She'll be here in 3 hours and she can't know about us. She wouldn't understand." Alexander was quiet for a moment. "She'll understand, Emma. You know what I mean? A man like you, a woman like me. She'll think you're taking advantage of me, or that I'm reaching above my station." "A man like me," Alexander repeated slowly. "And what kind of man is that, exactly?" Emma realized how her words sounded, but it was too late to take them back. "I didn't mean it like that. I just meant, we come from different worlds, Emma. Look at me." Alexander's voice was gentle but firm. "I don't care what world you think I come from. I care about you. I care about us. If your mother can't see how remarkable you are, then that's her failing, not yours." The mother's arrival, Janet Chen, arrived precisely at noon, armed with homemade soup, strong opinions, and an immediate disapproval of Emma's fancy apartment building. "This must cost you a fortune," she said, looking around Emma's modest one-bedroom with suspicion. "You're not living beyond your means, are you?" "It's fine, Mom. I can afford it." Janet's eagle eyes immediately spotted the first edition Jane Eyre on Emma's coffee table. "This is new and expensive looking. Where did you get such a fancy book?" Emma's mind went blank. She couldn't tell her mother about Alexander's gift without revealing their relationship. "It was a bonus from work," she lied. "For good performance." Janet picked up the book, examining it closely. "Companies don't give out gifts like this, Emma. Someone gave this to you. Someone with money." Her eyes narrowed. "Is there a man involved?" "Oh, before." Emma could answer. There was a knock at the door. Emma's heart sank when she looked through the peephole, saw Alexander standing in the hallway with flowers and a concerned expression. "Who is it, dear?" Janet asked. Emma had no choice but to open the door. Alexander's eyes immediately went to the older woman standing behind Emma, and his expression shifted to one of polite professionalism. "Mr. Winters," Emma said formally. "What a surprise. I wanted to check on your recovery," he said carefully, offering the flowers. "These are from everyone at the office." Janet stepped forward, her maternal instincts on high alert. "You must be Emma's boss." "I'm her mother, Janet Chen." Alexander stepped into the apartment, his corporate mask firmly in place. "Alexander Winters." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Chen." "Mr. Winters," Janet repeated, recognition dawning in her eyes. "The Mr. Winters? The Millionaire CEO? I prefer to focus on the work we do rather than financial labels," Alexander said diplomatically. But Emma could see her mother's wheels turning, and she knew nothing good would come of it. The confrontation after Alexander left, citing urgent business matters, Janet wasted no time in cornering her daughter. "Emma Chen, what exactly is going on between you and that man?" "Nothing, Mom. He's just checking on an injured employee." "Injured employees don't get personal visits from billionaire CEOs. And they certainly don't get expensive books as bonuses." Janet held up the Jane Eyre. "This man has feelings for you." Emma felt her cheeks burn. "Even if he did, would that be so terrible?" "Yes," Janet exclaimed. "Emma, men like Alexander Winters don't marry girls like us. They might play with them, but they don't marry them. You'll end up heartbroken and unemployed." "You don't know him," Emma said defensively. "He's not like that. I know men with power and money, dear. They take what they want and move on. Promise me you won't get involved with him." Emma looked at her mother's worried face and felt torn between loyalty and love. "Promise," she said, quietly hating herself for the lie. The distance over the next few days. With her mother hovering constantly, Emma found it impossible to see Alexander privately. He called and texted, but she kept their conversations brief and professional. Acutely aware of Janet's watchful eyes, Alexander noticed the change immediately. When he stopped by on the 4th day of Janet's visit, his expression was guarded. "Seem distant," he said quietly, when Janet stepped into the kitchen. "My mother is just protective," Emma whispered. "She doesn't understand." "What doesn't she understand, Emma? That I care about you? That you care about me? Or that you're ashamed to be seen with me?" The pain in his voice cut through Emma like a knife. "I'm not ashamed. I could never be ashamed of you." "Then what are you afraid of?" Before Emma could answer, Janet returned with coffee, and the moment was lost. But Alexander's question echoed in Emma's mind long after he left. The realization that night, as Emma lay in bed listening to her mother's gentle snoring from the couch, she realized that she was at a crossroads. She could continue to hide her feelings, continue to let other people's fears and prejudices dictate her choices, or she could be brave enough to reach for something extraordinary. She thought about Alexander's hands catching her when she fell, about his tears in the hospital, about the way he looked at her as if she was the most precious thing in his world. She thought about their conversations, their connection, the way he saw her not as a timid employee, but as a woman worth cherishing. Emma. Chen had spent her entire life being afraid to speak up, afraid to stand out, afraid to want something more than what seemed safe and appropriate. But love, she was learning, required courage. Tomorrow, she would have to choose between the safe path her mother wanted for her and the terrifying, beautiful possibility of a future with Alexander Winters. For the first time in her life, Emma was ready to be brave. Emma woke before dawn, her decision crystallizing as the first rays of sunlight crept through her bedroom window. She couldn't continue living her life based on other people's fears and limitations. Alexander had shown her a version of herself that was brave, worthy of love, and capable of extraordinary things. She refused to let that woman disappear back into the shadows. Her mother was still sleeping on the couch when Emma quietly made her way to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. She needed to have a conversation that was years overdue, one that would either free her or create an irreparable rift between them. "Mom," Emma said gently, shaking Janet's shoulder. "We need to talk." Janet sat up, immediately alert with the instinct of mothers everywhere. "What's wrong, dear? I'm in love with Alexander Winters." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Janet's face went through several emotions: surprise, dismay, and finally, resignation. "Emma, honey, I know you think you are, but men like him are human beings capable of genuine emotion," Emma interrupted, surprising both of them with her firmness. "Mom, I've spent my whole life being afraid to speak up, afraid to take chances, afraid to believe I deserve good things. I won't do it anymore." Janet stood up, wrapping her robe tighter around herself. "I'm trying to protect you from getting hurt. But you're also protecting me from being happy," Emma said quietly. "Alexander sees me, Mom. Really sees me. Thinks I'm intelligent and kind and worthy of love. When I'm with him, I feel like the person I always wanted to be." The revelation Janet walked to the window, staring out at the busy Chicago street below. When she turned back, there were tears in her eyes. "You want to know why I'm so afraid for you?" she asked. "'Cause I was you once. 25 years ago, I fell in love with a man who was everything your father wasn't: successful, charming, from a different world. He made me feel special, chosen." Emma's breath caught. What? She had never heard this story before. What happened? "He got tired of me," Janet said simply. "Found someone more suitable to his social circle. Someone with the right education, the right connections, was left pregnant and heartbroken. And if your father hadn't stepped up to marry me and raise you as his own." Emma stared at her mother in shock. "Dad isn't my biological father?" Janet shook her head. "Thomas Chen is your father in every way that matters. He chose to love you, to raise you, to be there for every scraped knee in school, play. But your biological father, he was a man who took what he wanted and moved on." The revelation hit Emma like a physical blow. Everything she had believed about her family, her identity, had shifted in an instant. But as the shock faded, one thing became clear. "I'm sorry that happened to you," Emma said finally. "But Alexander isn't that man. And I'm not you." As if summoned by their conversation, Emma's phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "Board meeting emergency? Won't be able to visit today, but thinking of you." Janet read the message over Emma's shoulder. "See? Work comes first. It always will." But Emma saw something different in the message. She saw a man who was dealing with a crisis, but still took the time to let her know he was thinking of her. A man who had been visiting her every day despite running a multi-million-dollar company. "I'm going to him," Emma announced suddenly. "Emma, you can barely walk without crutches. Then I'll use crutches." Emma was already moving toward her closet, pulling out the one professional dress she owned that made her feel confident. "He needs to know that I'm not going anywhere, that I'm brave enough to fight for us." Janet watched her daughter transform. Before her eyes, Gone was the timid girl who apologized for taking up space. In her place was a woman with purpose, with strength Emma hadn't known she possessed. "Are you sure about this?" Janet asked quietly. "I've never been sure about anything in my life," Emma replied. "I'd rather take the risk and find out what we could be together than spend the rest of my life wondering what if." The board meeting crisis. Alexander sat at the head of the conference table, his expression stone cold as the board members argued around him. The Yamamoto deal, their biggest potential contract of the year, was falling apart due to what appeared to be a leak of confidential information. Someone had betrayed the company, and fingers were being pointed in every direction. "We need to find out who had access to these documents," board member Richard Hayes was saying. "And we need to do it fast, or Yamamoto will walk." Alexander's mind was spinning, but part of his attention was on Emma. He had wanted desperately to see her today, to make sure she was healing properly, to continue the conversation her mother's presence had interrupted. The growing distance between them over the past week had been eating at him, sir. His assistant, Patricia, appeared at his elbow. "There's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent." "I'm in the middle of a crisis, Patricia. Unless the building is on fire, it's Emma Chen, sir. She's well. She's on crutches and very determined." Alexander's heart stopped. Emma was here, at his office, during the most important board meeting of the year. Something must be terribly wrong. "Excuse me," he said to the board members. Ignoring their protests as he strode from the room, the declaration of Zonder found Emma in the reception area outside the boardroom, balancing on her crutches. And looking both terrified and determined, she had dressed carefully in a navy blue dress and low heels, her hair pulled back in a professional bun, but he could see the nervous tremor in her hands. "Emma, what's wrong? Are you hurt? Is your mother okay?" "I'm fine," she said quickly. "Just I needed to see you, to tell you something important." Alexander glanced back at the boardroom where he could hear raised voices through the glass. "Emma, this isn't a great time. You have a major crisis, and I love you," she said simply, cutting him off. The words hit Alexander like a lightning bolt. Everything else, the board meeting, the crisis, the angry voices behind him faded into background noise.
"Did you say?"
"I love you, Alexander Winters," Emma repeated, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I love your intelligence and your dedication to your work. I love how you take care of people even when you pretend not to care. I love how you caught me when I fell, literally and figuratively. I love how you see the best in me even when I can't see it in myself." Alexander stared at her, overwhelmed. "Emma, I know we come from different worlds," she continued. "I know people will say I'm not good enough for you, not sophisticated enough, or connected enough. But I also know that when we're together, those differences don't matter. What matters is how we feel about each other." The interruption before Alexander could respond, the boardroom door burst open and Richard Hayes stormed out. "Alexander, we need you back in there immediately. Yamamoto is on the phone, and if we don't have answers in the next 10 minutes, He stopped short when he saw Emma, his expression shifting from urgency to barely concealed disdain. "I see," he said coldly. "We're in the middle of a corporate crisis, and our CEO is having personal meetings with employees." Emma felt the familiar urge to shrink away, to apologize, and disappear. But then she remembered her promise to herself to be brave. "Mr. Hayes," she said clearly, "I'm sorry for the interruption. I know this is important business." Richard's eyebrows rose in surprise at being addressed directly by someone he clearly considered beneath his notice. Alexander stepped protectively closer to Emma. "Richard, meet Emma Chen, one of our most valuable analysts." "Emma, this is Richard." "Hayes board member, quarterly reports," Richard said suddenly. Recognition dawning. "You're the one who's been preparing those exceptional analyses." Emma nodded. "Yes, sir. Those reports have been instrumental in several major decisions this year," Richard admitted grudgingly, then his expression hardened again. "But this is hardly the time for social visits." The solution Alexander was about to respond when Emma spoke up again, surprising everyone. "Mr. Hayes, you mentioned a leak in the Yamamoto deal. May I ask what specific information was compromised?" Richard looked at Alexander incredulously. "We're discussing this with an administrative assistant?" "She's not an administrative assistant," Alexander said firmly. "She's a senior analyst, and one of the smartest people in this building." "Emma, what are you thinking?" Emma took a deep breath. "I've been working on data compilation for various projects, including preliminary research for international expansion. If there was a leak, it might be traceable through document access logs. Richard's expression shifted from dismissive to interested.
Alan.
Every time someone accesses a digital document, it creates a timestamp and user ID log I could access. The server logs for the Yamamoto files. I might be able to identify who accessed what information and when. Alexander stared at her in amazement. In the middle of declaring her love, during a corporate crisis, Emma was potentially providing the solution they needed. Patricia Alexander called to his assistant. Get Emma administrative access to the server logs immediately. The investigation. 2 minutes later, Emma sat in Alexander's private office, her crutches propped against his desk as she navigated through computer logs with expert precision. Alexander and Richard watched over her shoulder as she traced document access patterns. Here, she said, pointing to the screen. Someone accessed the Yamamoto contract details at 11:47 p.m. last Tuesday. That's unusual because most people don't work that late, unless it's an emergency. Who was it? Alexander asked. Emma cross-referenced the user ID. David Morrison from the legal department. Richard frowned. Morrison left the company 3 weeks ago. How is he still accessing our systems? His access should have been revoked immediately upon termination, Alexander said grimly. This is a security failure, Emma continued typing. It looks like he downloaded multiple files related to the Yamamoto deal, including financial projections and negotiation strategies. She looked up at Alexander. If you revoke his access now and contact Yamamoto to explain that a former disgruntled employee leaked information, you might be able to salvage the deal. Richard was staring at Emma with newfound respect. Young lady, you may have just saved this company millions of dollars. The aftermath, after Richard left to handle the Yamamoto situation and had worked to secure the system breach, Alexander and Emma were finally alone in his office. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting everything in golden light. You came here on crutches, in the middle of a crisis. To tell me you love me, Alexander said, still processing everything that had happened, and to help solve your corporate espionage problem, apparently. Emma added with a small smile. Alexander moved closer, his eyes intense. Emma, what you did today. The way you stood up to Richard. The way you solved a problem that had our entire board stumped. Do you see what I see when I look at you? What do you see? I see a brilliant, brave, incredible woman who happens to be the love of my life. Alexander cupped her face in his hands. I love you too, Emma. I love your intelligence and your kindness. And your courage. I love how you make me want to be a better man. Their kiss was interrupted by a knock on the door. Patricia peeked in. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a woman in the lobby claiming to be Emma's mother. She seems quite upset about something. Emma and Alexander exchanged looks. My mother tracked me down, Emma said. I probably thinks I've lost my mind. Have you? Alexander asked with a smile. Completely, Emma replied, but in the best possible way. They found Janet in the lobby, pacing anxiously and attracting curious stares from other visitors. Emma-chen, what do you think you're doing? She demanded as soon as she saw them. Running off to chase after a man like some lovesick teenager? Mom? Please keep your voice down, Emma said, aware of the interested looks from other people in the lobby. I will not keep my voice down. I raised you better than this. Alexander stepped forward. Mrs. Chen, I understand your concerns about Emma's well-being. As her mother, you want to protect her. But I need you to know that I love your daughter, and I have every intention of cherishing and respecting her for the rest of my life. Janet looked between them, seeing the way Alexander's hand rested protectively on Emma's back, the way Emma stood straighter and more confident beside him. You say that now, Janet said quietly, but when the novelty wears off, when your friends and family start asking questions about why you're with someone so far beneath your social class. Mrs. Chen Alexander interrupted gently. May I tell? You something about your daughter that you might not know? Janet nodded reluctantly. In the past hour, Emma solved a crisis that was threatening to destroy a multi-million-dollar deal. She walked into a boardroom full of powerful men who initially dismissed her, and she earned their respect through pure intelligence and competence. She's not beneath anyone's social class. She's extraordinary enough to elevate any social class. She chooses to join. Emma felt tears prick her eyes at Alexander's words. The understanding Janet studied Alexander's face for a long moment. Seeing the genuine love and admiration there, Then she looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and saw a confidence and happiness she had never seen before. "You really love her," she said finally. It wasn't a question. "More than I thought it was possible to love anyone," Alexander replied. Janet turned to Emma. "And you're sure about this? Really sure?" Emma took her mother's hands. "Mom, I spent my whole life being afraid to want anything more than what seemed safe and reasonable. But Alexander makes me feel like I can be anyone, do anything. Doesn't see limitations when he looks at me. He sees possibilities." Janet's eyes filled with tears. "I just don't want you to get hurt the way I did." "I know," Emma said softly. "But living in fear of getting hurt isn't really living at all. You taught me to be careful, but you also taught me to be kind and hardworking and honest. Those qualities are what made Alexander fall in love with me. I'm not the same as your situation, Mom, and neither is he." The resolution 6. Months later. Emma stood in Alexander's penthouse, which no longer felt cold and empty. Her books filled the shelves, her photographs dotted the walls, and her laughter had chased away the loneliness that had haunted the space for years. She was no longer the invisible girl who hid behind her desk. Alexander had encouraged her to pursue an MBA, which the company was sponsoring. She had been promoted to senior strategic analyst, a position that utilized her intelligence and gave her a voice in major corporate decisions. "Ready for tonight?" Alexander asked, adjusting his tie in the mirror. Tonight was the company's annual gala, the first major social event Emma would attend as Alexander's girlfriend. She was nervous but excited, wearing a stunning emerald green dress that Alexander had chosen because it matched her eyes. "Ready," she said, then paused. "Alexander, can I ask you something? Anything? That night, when I fell, when you caught me,
Oh.
did you know then that you loved me?" Alexander considered the question seriously. "I think part of me had been falling in love with you for months without realizing it. That night when I saw you in danger, when I thought I might lose you before I ever really knew you. That's when I understood that you had become essential to my happiness." Emma smiled, remembering the tears in his eyes at the hospital. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think sometimes we have to fall before we can really learn to fly." Alexander pulled her into his arms. "Then I'm grateful for every fall that led me to you." The new beginning as they walked into the gala together. Emma felt the curious stares and whispered conversations that followed them. But instead of shrinking away, she held her head high. She belonged here not because of Alexander's wealth or status, but because she had earned her place through her own merit and courage. Janet, who had flown in for the event, watched from across the room as Emma confidently conversed with board members and their spouses. The shy girl who used to apologize for taking up space had transformed into a poised woman who commanded respect. "She looks happy," Thomas Chen said, appearing beside his wife with 2 glasses of champagne. "She looks confident," Janet corrected. "Never taught her that." "No," Thomas agreed, watching Alexander's proud smile as Emma charmed a group of international clients. "She learned that herself. Sometimes our children have to teach us that love isn't about playing it safe. It's about being brave enough to reach for something extraordinary." Janet nodded, finally understanding what her daughter had tried to tell her months ago. Sometimes the greatest risk is not taking any risks at all, the promise later that night. As they slow danced to the final song of the evening, Alexander whispered in Emma's ear, "I have something to ask you." Emma pulled back to look at him, her heart skipping at the serious expression on his face. "Emma Chen," he said, his voice carrying across the dance floor, causing other couples to turn and watch. "You taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be perfect for them." Emma's breath caught as Alexander dropped to one knee right there on the dance floor, pulling out a ring that sparkled like captured starlight. "Will you marry me?" Through happy tears, Emma looked around at all the faces watching them, some surprised, some delighted, but all witnessing a love story that had defied expectations and transformed to hearts. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." As Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, the entire ballroom erupted in applause. Emma heard her mother crying happy tears somewhere in the crowd, saw the genuine joy on the faces of colleagues who had watched their relationship bloom. But most importantly, She felt the absolute certainty that she had been brave enough to reach for something extraordinary. And it had reached back for her. Epilogue 3 years later. Emma Winters sat in her office at Winters Technology, not as an employee, but as vice president of strategic development and Alexander's equal partner in business as well as life. The shy girl who once organized files in silence now led board meetings and made decisions that shaped the company's future. Their love story had become something of a legend. In corporate circles, the billionaire CEO and the quiet analyst whose accident had revealed that the strongest foundations are built not on similar backgrounds, but on shared values, mutual respect, and the courage to love without reservation. And sometimes, when Emma looked back on that rainy night when she fell from a ladder, she realized it was the most fortunate accident of her life. Because sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with an unexpected fall and end with two hearts learning to fly together. Their wedding photo sat on her desk, Emma radiant in white lace, Alexander's eyes bright with tears of joy. And beside it, a small card with words Alexander had written to her on their first anniversary. Thank you for showing me that love isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about finding someone who inspires you to complete yourself. You didn't just heal my heart, Emma. You taught it how to hope again. As Emma finished reviewing the quarterly reports that had once seemed so daunting, she smiled at the memory of that terrified girl who used to hide behind her desk. That girl had been brave enough to fall in love with an impossible dream, and sometimes impossible dreams are simply extraordinary realities waiting for someone brave enough to believe in them.